So without wasting much time, we would introduce our first speaker, who is in the person of Fawad Ali Langah. And he's going to speak about, will SDGs still be relevant after the pandemic, a way forward? So Fawad, if you can hear us, can you please take over? And yes, we can hear you.
Sure. Thank you very much, Janet. I'll always thank you so much. And thank you very much, the great global minds, of course, I must say, for doing that, for great subjects, great topics. And of course, one of my favorite, which I can say, maybe I would say like, I am thankful for this pandemic, God forbid, please, not in a bad manner, but it really gives me a time. This pandemic has really given me a time to actually deeply study about SDGs. And I can say I am really fall in love with this one. Okay, bear with me. Let me just unmute all those rest of the speakers, unfortunately, because it's really a bit of like annoying because of their background voices. And then you can just raise your hand if someone would like to ask something onto that, so that will be much better. Fair enough. So thank you very much. Okay, guys. Today, of course, I'm going to start with that. Like, will SDGs still be relevant after a pandemic, a way forward? I didn't make any kind of a huge presentation on that, but I'm going to put it into the discussion manner. So I'm going to start, of course, by introducing myself, of course, as I'm from Pakistan. I'm Ambassador Fawad Langah. I'm life coach, SDG advocate, and activist, model UN trainer. And you can see it's a long list, of course. So because I'm very excited, I am just moving into what we are going to discuss today. So that's why, as I said, like, I didn't prepare anything much. I will just move into the discussion direction because I want everyone to feel this problem more in deep, not more into the theoretical side, but we should have to act together, as I stated the first speaker, and of course to think from our side, our local side, and then jump into to helping into that. So let's begin the discussion with I believe, actually, bear with me, I am just pausing my share, so we'll just moving into that. So I'm gonna start with the very good quotation by the United Nations Secretary General. He said, like, we need to turn the recovery into a real opportunity to do things right for the future, as stated by the Secretary General. So indeed, ladies and gentlemen, this year 2020 actually has witnessed an unprecedented, you can say, we didn't predict this thing, of course, and this COVID-19 crisis where many human life have been lost. May God bless them, of course. And we have also witnessed the tremendous magnitude and speed of a collapse in economic activity, something unseen in our lifetime, no doubt. And this is certainly not good for achieving the SDGs, no doubt, where prior to this crisis, the world was already falling behind in efforts to achieve them. Like, the SDGs offer as an integrated perspective to combat this crisis. And in 2030 agenda, if I could say, like, we have a holistic framework that brings the global economic, environmental, and development agendas together for the first time ever. Because they are so broad and complex, the very thing I must say on this, that it does, of course, also criticize. And even though after having this COVID-19, the question, of course, comes like, do we actually, or do the world is actually think that is this SDG or Agenda 2030 is relevant right now? The answer I'm going to give you right, like, after short, after telling all those stats into that. Indeed, the crisis has started and brutally exposed the health crisis, I must say, health sector, but quickly then it is shifted into the economical crisis, or actually into the human crisis as well, I must say. I mean, as per the ILO, International Labor Organization, that estimates nearly half of the world's workforce, 1.6 billion, who actually risk losing their livelihoods due to the great lockdown, of course, because there was no other choice for the government. And in fact, as per the IMF, the latest World Economic Outlook, actually, this had like a cumulative loss of a global GDP over 2020 to 2021, which is of course just about after hardly 5 to 6 months away from us. Of course, it says like around $9 trillion greater than the combined economies, as if we just let's say more into the European side, or if you just moving into the Asia Pacific side. So it's a like the Asia Pacific alone itself, it has dropped down to around 172 billion dollars from the trade side, and moving into about to the poverty ratio side, it is actually really downfall because of the impact of the virus. It's about 40 million to 500 million people into the poverty ratio. And then moving into the health sector, more into like aftershocks, as malaria and malnutrition, or if you talk about more into the health systems, it's really go really upside down now. More into side, move to the education sector. Like in April, like almost all schools were closure, no doubt, and more than 190 countries has forced at least 1.57 billion students from classrooms. I mean, these are actually fears. Many of these students lost to their attentions. They are actually having their mental health issues. They're actually like, totally their education systems are totally destroyed. And in fact, they were like more vulnerable to the child labor, trafficking, and in fact to the child marriage side, because there was no any option left for the students, even for the parent, for the family as well. So the SDGs are not only useful for understanding COVID-19, they are also a valuable tool to guide the national and international recovery efforts, I must say. Like in SDGs, we have a blueprint to not only address health security, but to address food, economic, and climate security as well. Like all 17 goals, if you start from goal number 1 and then ended up with the 17, all 5 are the people, and then the rest is the prosperity, and then the middle one are actually the environmental, of course, and then ending up with the peace and justice, and then collaborating all of them into one a global partnership. So it's a proper set. However, the pandemic has actually exposed the weaknesses in the international system that need to be addressed. I would say like build back better. Build back better, that particular agenda. The past couple of months, no doubt, if you see the poverty SDG 1, weak health system SDG 3, inadequate water and sanitation SDG 6, and subsequent standard on international cooperation, that is a global partnership, that is 70. So they all are dismantled. So do we actually have to compare with the things that because of this pandemic, we actually expose what is the international system is going on, what is the government is doing actually, what is the infrastructure is actually going on. So that COVID no doubt did expose, but on the other hand, because we have all those 17 set, it really helped us to focus our government, to focus all eyes, to focus all the decision makers. Like this is the set. If we keep moving on to the same, we will be able to somehow cope up with the situation very soon actually. So the truth is that SDG promote a vision for 2030, planet Earth, where we have eradicated issues such as poverty, gender inequality, and world hunger. So can you imagine a world without all these problems? Did we actually imagine? Or can you imagine the difference it would make in this pandemic? Like if we lived in an equal world. I know you can't, because sadly we are far from reaching that reality. It is no doubt. But how about if your country provided free healthcare, but didn't have enough resources to provide services to everyone. Because that's the reality about 40% as per the stats approximately to all of the countries in the world. Do you know that how all this could be avoided if we took a serious action towards SDG 3, good health and well-being? How could we do that? Investing in healthcare could be a good start. And again, do we actually know like how could we be avoided if we took those agendas, Agenda 2030, and those 17 goals, if we could have took it seriously before it has been started in 2015 September, when it's been came into being. Although the idea is 1972 in its Stockholm, the idea behind when there was a conference, one world conference and an environmental conference, the idea back in 1972, but then it moved to the MDGs, and then it has been failed first, and then we have introduced it into 2015, and then 15 years of time period. But if we could have done that, if we could have took serious initiative on that before, maybe we could have not much being exposed after this pandemic, I must say. And now we are blaming on that, sorry to say, that will this SDG is relevant after the pandemic or not? Of course it does. Believe me, it does. And it's good that we recognize that if we have took a more serious action towards SDGs, believe me, we could have been more comfortable. And as I said, what about after this? What about this pandemic after? Like, will this SDGs be relevant? Again, I'm going to ask the question the same. And honestly, answer is yes. Just think about like for a second, just a second, like there are things that are getting better as well. Like right now, because of this pandemic, like how the CO2 emission have had biggest drop since World War II in mid of 40s, of course. And the ozone is actually recovering, if you have seen that. So this SDGs is like a New Year resolution, the goals that we need to strive to achieve. They aim to help our society, our environment, our economy, our world to be the better place. And it's important to understand that if we can achieve one goal without achieving all other, because they all are interconnected. They all are interconnected in a manner. They all are actually the needful, and they're relying on every single goal actually. Like permanent change calls for permanent action indeed. And that what we have to do after that this is over, of course, I would say. And a great way to cause a permanent change is by working towards SDGs, indeed. And of course, if I just move towards to the ending of that, I would say like achieving the 2030 agenda could be the answer for all our problems. It could be a quick fix in our planet, in our society, but this will only be a reality if after this pandemic, like we start educating ourselves and others about importance and getting know about what is the SDGs about. But the main thing is actually, and the responsibility for all the decision makers, authorities, countries, it's time to really invest more on those goals that could definitely live the change and of course change our forever. And moreover, the three immediate action needs to be put forward in a medium-term policy responses, I must say. Like country needs to a coordinated stimulus packages, I must say, which include reversing the decline in aid and increasing the concessional finance, especially those are like least development countries, underdeveloping countries, actually. And additionally, to prevent the debt crisis for poor countries, must be allowed immediately to suspend their debt payments and their resistance debt, like for having a more sustainability beyond the crisis, I must say. And then secondly, the government and the authority and the monitoring authority, I must say, must continue to stabilize the financial markets by continuing to inject much needing liquidity. And then to adding into that, like governments and then the rest of the partners, the different IGOs and stakeholders, there's investors, of course, and the private financial institutes, I must say, they should have to roll over those debt and those SMEs, of course, and individuals at the later stage. We need to continue promoting sustainable investment, for example, like by requesting mandatory disclosures and minimum standards for investment of different products, and a requirement actually for advisor, of course, to ask for a sustainable preference. And lastly, into the policy side, I would say, like, these should be included into the public and private investment in sustainable development, such as like building resilient infrastructure, strengthening social protection system, additional investment in crisis prevention, or adding into like risk reduction planning, eliminating trade barriers and then restriction that affect supply chain. That's all right. And lastly, into the conclusion, I would say the vision, of course, after the post-COVID world, I must say, it's the SDG paint the picture of world free from poverty by 2030, indeed, where there is a universal access to healthcare, education, water, and sanitization. It is a resilient world where we would be in a much stronger position to withstand shocks like COVID-19, because we don't know when we will be able to come out with this global pandemic. And if we manage, hopefully with the grace of Almighty, if we will be managed to come up very soon with this global pandemic, but are we actually ready that if any, God forbid, if any pandemic do come in our life, are we ready for it? And then if I could say the vision for 2030 is actually outlined, the SDGs may seem unreachable, no doubt, but the practical will and amount of stimulus being mobilized to combat COVID-19, no doubt, or even any upcoming, God forbid, but any upcoming pandemic in our life. When we push comes to shove, humanity can step up to deal with complex, no doubt, or the global challenges. And SDGs must be pursued with the same enthusiastic, with the same cooperation, with the same solidarity, urgency, commitment, a global partnership. And we are saying, of course, to fight against together this COVID-19. Only then we will be able to achieve the vision that a world free from the poverty and having a proper education, right, and having a very good and sustainable life. So again, the question is, and the answer is right off at the front of you. Yes, this is the set which we really needed in doing that.
Can you please
I'm moving into that. Yes, I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Yes.
Yes.
Can you do wrap up so that we get to the next?
I'm almost done, Janet. I'm sorry. I'm almost done. That's all from my side. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome.
Thank you very much. So that's all from my side, everyone. And that's thank you very much. My contact, and I'll get back to the moderator. Thank you, moderator. Over to you now. And that's all. Thank you very much.